What's up, everyone, and welcome to the Fantasy Mafia podcast. Jordan and Jerry back here again, continuing our free agent series that we're doing. Today we're doing running backs. We got about 20 of them listed out here. It was just hard to really narrow down the list and eliminate anybody, so we actually added to the list and ended up with a round number of 20. Some studs and some not so studs, but some players that we saw last year come in and kind of put on a show, so they have to be mentioned. So we're going to kick it off here with Aaron Jones. It's probably the top running back free agent this year, coming off of a really good season out there in Green Bay, and after a season that was even better the year before, made it to the conference championship game for the second year in a row. He was just one of the most consistent running backs in the league last year. Just overall, just one of the better running backs. He's without knowing where he's going to go. If he stays in Green Bay, I mean, he's going to be a first round pick in a lot of redraft leagues. And then obviously we got to see where he goes to see if anything changes, if he goes to a committee or if he goes to a team that doesn't really run the ball too much. I mean, the best landing spots that we got for him are the Dolphins, Jets, 49ers, and Cardinals. Now, if he goes to three of those teams, I think that he's still going to be a first round pick, and then the Jets might kind of bump him down a little bit just because that offense really isn't much that you want any part of. But he's still, I mean, Aaron Jones still has all the talent in the world to really get things done. So you still have to kind of look at him even if he goes to the Jets. But where's your best landing spot for Aaron Jones?
So I think realistically, number one, he had a great season last year because a lot of people thought 2019 was very fluky, and a lot of people were expecting a great amount of regression, and he did finish as fantasy's fifth highest scoring running back. So, I mean, once again, he proved that he has the talent. I love the way he runs the ball. I mean, he runs very aggressively. He runs with purpose, and I hate when running backs dance around. I always hated Le'Veon Bell in his prime. I mean, it worked for him, and he had great vision and balance, but not many guys have succeeded running the ball like that. So, I love Aaron Jones, and I think he's a very talented running back, versatile in the passing game. I realistically think that the Jets and Jaguars will overpay for him, if we're being realistic about this. Now, is that a good landing spot for him? I mean, probably not. Even the Dolphins, as much as I like them as an organization, I don't know if I trust their offensive line enough for Aaron Jones to be productive there. And I think a lot of the focus would be on Aaron Jones, and he hasn't been used to that with Aaron Rodgers. He would face a lot of stacked boxes. But the Jaguars and the Dolphins and the Jets, for that matter, all have a ton of salary cap space. All three of those teams have a quarterback on a rookie deal, so realistically they can afford to pay a running back in the short term since they're not paying their quarterback a ridiculous amount of money right now, which is kind of the advantage. If I was any of those teams, I would spend money elsewhere, but I definitely think Aaron Jones is a top 10 running back in this league. So if there's a guy to spend it on, he would be one of them. But I have him going to a team that not a lot of people have talked about, and that's the Seattle Seahawks, who it would be a little tough for them to fit in an Aaron Jones contract with the cap. But one thing you'll hear me mention a lot today is this is a very saturated running back market. I mean, there's guys like Marlon Mack who we'll talk about. I think he's a starting caliber running back, but there's so many running backs available via free agency and the draft. I don't think he's going to be a starter, and I think that's going to lead to you seeing Aaron Jones not getting paid as much money as we think he's going to. And we saw that with Melvin Gordon last offseason in the Broncos. Everybody's, he's going to get paid. And then he got a 2-year, $12 million deal. So, I mean, he's getting paid decently, but that is not the money we expected him to make originally. And I think Aaron Jones is worth more than that. But people are saying $15 million a year. Yeah, I mean, that's what he's asking for, but I don't think that's what he's going to get because a lot of teams are concerned with their lack of revenue from last year, and there's going to be a lot of salary cap concerns. So I have him going to the Seattle Seahawks. I think that they really struggled to be a balanced football team last year. There was too much pressure on Russell Wilson. it's a great offense for him to be a part of. I mean, you have a great quarterback, great weapons. The defense was much better at the end of the season. It wasn't as historically bad as they started. So I think that would be the best combination of a good coaching staff, a good quarterback, good weapons. He wouldn't be forced to be the guy. I mean, he would be the guy in the backfield, but not the entire offense wouldn't flow through him. So I think that would give him an opportunity to succeed. I'm surprised more people aren't talking about it. A lot of people are assuming Chris Carson's going to return, but I mean, like I said, it kind of depends on what the market bears, and I think that Aaron Jones is going to get paid, but not as much as we think.
Yeah, Chris Carson is definitely on our list. We'll be talking about him. It is a little different between this time last year and now, because this time last year, Mixon was still set to hit free agency, Alvin Kamara was still set to hit free agency, and Derrick Henry was still set to hit free agency. And now those three guys signed deals, and now it's just Aaron Jones. So it's Aaron Jones and a bunch of guys. I would put Chris Carson up there too, but after that, it's just a bunch of guys. And speaking of a bunch of guys, the next guy on the list is Todd Gurley.
He's a jag.
What a loser. But no, he's his days of being a starting running back, a tier 1 running back, are over with. He is more of just a guy that just punch in at the goal line and get you 10 to 15 touchdowns a year. Kind of like what LeGarrette Blount was the year that he went to New England, or the 1 year that he was in New England. I think he was there multiple years, but Gurley, if he goes somewhere, it definitely is going to be a committee backfield. He's not going to have the full reins. One of the best landing spots that we have here is the Steelers. We got the Cardinals, Steelers, and Ravens, in case you don't know how to read. But one of the landing spots is the Steelers, and I think that's actually a really good one. They got because another guy that's a free agent that we'll be talking about is James Conner. I don't think he'll be back, but they got Benny Snell, they got Anthony McFarland there, and Gurley could just come in, and with that, they got a pretty decent offensive line, come in there and get them the hard yardage, but he doesn't have to be the every down back like we saw when he was with the Rams, and I don't think he's going to be able to do that anymore. So going to a team like the Steelers where he is where he doesn't have to be, and they're more of a passing team too anyways. I mean, they restructured Big Ben. They got a pair of as of right now, they got a trio of good wide receivers, but one of them might be on the way out. But Gurley doesn't have to go in and be the top dog, and so I think that the Steelers would be my best spot for him.
Yeah, I mean, what was I preaching all off season and nobody listened to me? I mean, there were some people that were very high on Todd Gurley. All off season, I don't know how many times I said, I feel like I was bashing my own head into the wall, but I said before this season started, Todd Gurley was done. And, people say, oh, he'll have a healthy season. But as soon as you hear arthritis, I mean, I said it a million times, it doesn't magically go away. You don't wave a wand. So Todd Gurley will never, ever be a starting running back in this league again. I'll continue to say that. I think he was a very good goal line back, though. He was very good at converting last year for the Falcons. He did have 9 touchdowns for him, all of them primarily goal line touchdowns. And he is a big guy. He has good strength. I'm not going to say great speed anymore, but he has great strength and he gets great leverage. So he can still be a really effective goal line back. So I think he's a nice compliment at this point in his career. So my spot, which is not on here, is the Los Angeles Chargers. I thought Justin Jackson and Joshua Kelly were pitiful last year. Honestly, they just didn't look like they should be in the NFL. And Josh Kelly had a lot of opportunities, way more than he should have, in my opinion. But I think if you paired him with Austin Eckler, who obviously is on the smaller side, I think Todd Gurley could be a really effective goal line back for the Chargers. You have Justin Herbert there, and there's a lot of exciting pieces. So I think I'd really like him as a complement to Austin Eckler, and I think that's a good spot for him. Not as the guy, not even the pressure to maybe be the guy. Just let him be a goal line complement, because that's what he is at this point.
Yeah, I don't hate the Chargers. I just don't. I don't think they're going to give up on Kelly and Jackson that soon. I mean, you're probably not wrong, but I don't know if they I don't know if they will. Our next up is Philip Lindsay, and I mean, because they brought in Melvin Gordon, kind of made Philip Lindsay expendable. Just a couple of years removed from being an undrafted Pro Bowl player with the Denver Broncos. You got down here the best landing spots are the Panthers, the Jets, and the Jags. He's another running back who he's not going to go in and be the lead dog. With the Panthers, obviously they got Christian McCaffrey there. With the Jets, okay, all right, maybe I'll take that back. Maybe he could be a lead dog there. And then with the Jaguars, you got James Robinson, who we've talked a little bit about last week in our episode last week. But yeah, I mean he's gonna end up being like a number 2 somewhere. He's a good pass catcher out of the backfield. We saw him rush for over 1,000 yards. So I mean he can run the ball. He's still young. This is only his third or fourth season going in. Doesn't have a lot of mileage on those tires, especially with last year with Melvin Gordon coming in. But he's not going to get one of those big huge deals, and rightfully so. But we're gonna see his name a little bit next year, and he is going to be one of those guys that are probably going to. I mean, in deeper leagues, he's definitely going to be on some benches, and then in streaming or in streaming situations, you might be looking at a Philip Lindsay depending on matchup.
Yeah, I mean, I like Philip Lindsay. I mean, he had back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons up until last year. Melvin Gordon obviously ruined that a little bit, but I think he is an effective running back, and he could be ahead of not a lead dog, but he could be a part of an effective committee. So I have him going to the Ravens. They are losing Mark Ingram and potentially Gus Edwards. We'll get into that later, but as much as I like J.K. Dobbins, we've seen the Ravens under John Harbaugh use a committee almost every season. So they're not going to just roll with J.K. Dobbins next year. Not that Dobbins can't handle that load, but I think Philip Lindsay would be a really nice complement to J.K. Dobbins to take a little bit of that pressure and workload off of him. So I think from a fantasy perspective, that would be a great spot for Philip Lindsay, because not only will he have an opportunity to get some carries, he will have an opportunity in one of the best running games in the entire league. So he'd have some volume, a good opportunity share compared to other teams he would go with. So I think the Ravens would be an interesting spot for him.
Yeah, I don't hate that. The next one we got here is Chris Carson, who we just talked about a little bit. My personal favorite, and it's one of the best landing spots, would be the Bills. And I think that, I mean, we need a running back, or I'm saying we, if you guys don't know, I am a Bills fan, but the Bills need a running back that is not Devin Singletary. I think Zach Moss is a solid like goal line back, and he could definitely change a pace. But Chris Carson, he's personally, I think he's one of the better backs in the league. I don't think he's going to demand like better back money, especially because he has missed some time throughout his career. But he's a really good running back. I think the Bills would be one of the better spots for him, and he could give the Bills a run game that they really didn't have last year, partially because their offensive line their rushing offensive line wasn't that great. The pass blocking was good, but the run blocking wasn't that good. But yeah, I mean, just be another piece to the puzzle for the Bills just taking that next step.
And I wanted to ask you this at some point anyway. I mean, do you think the Bills need a running back, or are we just giving up on Singletary and Zach Moss combo now?
I think they need they're not, I mean, obviously they're not a running team, but they do need they need to have that element to their game. And really, it just wasn't there last year with Singletary and Moss. And again, I mean, you're not looking at a 12,000 yard or 1,200 yard rusher. 12,000 yard would be crazy.
Wow, that's impressive.
You're not looking at a 1,200 yard rusher with 13 touchdowns. But they do need to have more than what they had last year.
I gotcha. Fine. I mean, I think that Singletary and Moss combination can still get it done, but I have Chris Carson going to the Steelers, who you mentioned James Conner is going to be on his way out. Chris Carson has shown he can be the man, and he's had some big seasons with Seattle. Mike Tomlin's kind of alluded to it in the past. He wants to have a running back who can handle the whole load. He's not into this modernized two-headed monster backfield by committee nonsense. He wants a guy that can carry the load. And Chris Carson has dealt with injuries the last few years, but It's not as much as people think. I mean, he usually misses a few games, but very few running backs play 16 games in today's NFL, if we're being honest about it. So if he, misses 3 games a season, it's honestly kind of average at this point. So I think that would be a nice spot for him. The Steelers, this is a fun fact that I didn't know, and when I was doing some research, the Steelers had the second worst run blocking efficiency rating last year. That's really surprising. They're known to have one of the best offensive lines in the league, but and now their center's retiring. Villanueva, their left tackle, is a free agent as well. So there's a lot of question marks along that offensive line with an aging Ben. So it's not maybe the most ideal landing spot, but with no James Conner, Chris Carson would definitely be the man there, and I think that's what he's going to be looking for. I'm interested to see what kind of deal he gets. I mean, this is the perfect example of, he's a starting, top 20-ish running back in this league. Is he going to be paid appropriately? I don't know. So that'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, he's you would say he's the second best running back in this free agency class, right?
I'd probably put him third.
Behind Jones.
Behind this next guy.
Oh, Kenyan Drake. All right, so Kenyan Drake is next.
Great segue.
He's had obviously 2 years ago, during the half a year that he was on an excellent pace with the Arizona Cardinals after being traded from the Dolphins. Last year took a little bit of a step back, but still had a solid year, 10 touchdowns. They tried to work in a little bit of Chase Edmonds a little bit more last year. They did draft Eno Benjamin in last year's draft. Not saying that Eno's going to come in and take over for Kenyan Drake and just be the lead guy, but I don't think that we're going to see Kenyan Drake back in Arizona. This was a tough one for me. I don't have a best landing spot for him. I think that he could go to, obviously teams that need a running back and still be efficient, still be effective. I just don't think we're going to see that 2019 Cardinals Kenyan Drake anymore. I think we're going to see more of what we saw last year and a little bit of what we saw with the Dolphins. Now, mind you, the Cardinals last year were more of a passing offense. Kyler Murray was going into his second year in the league. He was getting a little bit more comfortable with the offense, and obviously they traded for DeAndre Hopkins, so getting it to him a little bit more. So maybe it just wasn't the best offense for Kenyan Drake, but I think that I think he's still got a lot left in the tank, especially because he really wasn't used as much as he could be used when he was with Miami, and then he only has a season and a half in Arizona. But he's definitely gonna get some money. He's gonna get some good money, but I can't really put a finger on where I think he's gonna go.
Yeah, so I think this is the juiciest landing spot for whoever ends up there. I have him going to the Atlanta Falcons. I personally believe they'll most likely draft somebody, but if I had to pick, as of right now, as we sit here today, the Falcons need a running back. So, you can't play the guessing game of maybe they'll take a running back, maybe they'll do this, maybe they'll do that. At this point, they need a running back, and I think Kenyan Drake's still a starting caliber, top half of maybe top 20 running back in this league. I don't think he's going to get paid an enormous amount, but I'd be interested to see him in that system with Arthur Smith now, with Matt Ryan, Julio Ridley. They have lots of weapons. He'd be utilized out of the backfield. You did mention he had 10 touchdowns. Todd Gurley had 9 there last season, so there is goal line opportunities to be had. So I think if he ended up in Atlanta, he would have pretty solid RB2 value.
All right. Our next running back that we have is Wayne Gallman, who kind of just took over for Saquon Barkley after Barkley went down. He's a tricky one because he's one of those guys he's not one of those guys. It was one of those backfields where if I had a Christian McCaffrey, or if I had Saquon Barkley or somebody like that, I wasn't really touching the backup. I wasn't handcuffing them. But Gallman came on and ended up having a better than expected season. Well, from the start of the season, obviously better than expected because people expected Saquon Barkley. But when Barkley went down and people are scrambling to see who the backup running back for the Giants was, and me seeing that it was Wayne Gallman, I wasn't really excited about it. But he exceeded some expectations, and I think he's earned a chance to go be a backup somewhere else. I don't think he's going to be a starter anywhere. And I mean, at least I hope not. But I think that the best landing spots that you have written down for him are the Panthers, Texans, and Dolphins, and those are all really good spots. I mean, especially if Mike Davis leaves Carolina, then Wayne Gallman would just take his space there, and you still got Christian McCaffrey. I mean, you're not overtaking Christian McCaffrey. My favorite of the three, though, would probably be the Texans. He would have an opportunity to go in there, especially with Duke Johnson not going back there. They restructured David Johnson. He would have an opportunity to come in and kind of just be like a 1B with David Johnson. But I mean, the Texans offense, I don't think, especially if they get rid of Deshaun Watson, they're really not going to be too exciting, or a lot of the players are going to be after in fantasy terms. But I think that his best opportunity to get some playing time would be the Texans.
Yeah, and I have him going to the Panthers. That's my number one for him. I do think that he is a backup, but based on Christian McCaffrey's injury last season, I do think they're going to have to lessen his workload a little bit. I mean, you can't keep giving him the ball a billion times a year as much as they would love to, and it's a great formula for winning. They also are paying him a lot of money, and you have to think about the longevity of it. And Wayne Gallman proved he can be an effective backup. He can play on passing downs. If you need him to start a few games, he can be effective in that role. He's pretty versatile in general. He's a good pass blocker, good pass catcher out of the backfield, runs tough. So I think he would be pretty well suited in Matt Rule and Joe Brady's offense.
All right, good one. I like it. Marlon Mack, a guy that we sort of forgot about. We kind of figured that his role was going to be taken over by Jonathan Taylor. We just didn't think it was going to happen that early. He ended up getting hurt well, there wasn't a preseason, but in the early part of the year before the games even kicked off. And then it was just Jonathan Taylor and Nyheim Hines from there. And Marlon Mack is now a free agent. That was kind of just some bad luck, because Marlon Mack really had an opportunity to go out and kind of help the rookie out, but also kind of just get his next contract in line, because now he's a free agent. I think that he can still be a starter. The top landing spots that you have are Jets, Seahawks, and Ravens. I think the Jets would be the best place for him. Maybe not for his game, but for him to just go and be a starter somewhere and still show that he can still play. Because just 2 years ago, he had 8 touchdowns, as a lead back in Indianapolis, and that's where we kind of just went into last year after they drafted Jonathan Taylor, and we're like, okay, so what are they doing with all these guys, and how long into the season are we going to have Marlon Mack before Jonathan Taylor comes in? And now, I mean, he kind of had a year to just recover and get better and hopefully get a contract, maybe a 1 or 2 year deal, prove it deal. The Jets, I think, would be a good spot for him.
Yeah, I think the Jets are ideal for him and his workload and his future. I do think that realistically, though, it goes back. He's the perfect example. If you asked me a year ago, I would have said Marlon Mack would 100% be a starter somewhere. But based on all of these available running backs in free agency and via the draft, I don't think he's going to get a starting job. I think he's going to have to go somewhere where he can work his way back. It's funny. I went through this entire list and had to come back to Marlon Mack because I had no idea where I wanted him to go. I did have him. I think the Bills would be kind of an intriguing landing spot as well if they are looking to improve that backfield. I do think he's better than Singletary and Moss, so that would be, I think, a fantastic landing spot for him just because of that offense that he would be in. But I had another one that I wanted to throw out there that I had him going to at the end. This team actually was splitting carries more than people realized last year, and they're losing a few backs in free agency, but I have them going to the Raiders, which I know isn't going to be a popular one, but Josh Jacobs has been very banged up. I think they need a top-end backup from what I've seen. And, I mean, Devontae Booker was getting more carries than I think most people realize when Josh Jacobs was healthy. So I think there's carries to be had there. in Las Vegas. So that's one that I haven't seen. A lot of people saying they're going to go after a running back, but they do have a little bit of a hole there behind Josh Jacobs right now.
As a heavy Jacobs dynasty owner in a couple leagues, I really don't want that to happen. All right, next up we got Jamal Williams, another Green Bay Packers running back, and I mean with Aaron Jones potentially leaving, Jamal Williams hitting free agency. They got AJ Dillon, but really nobody behind them. I see. I don't really want to jump ahead, but I see that you got the Packers being the best spot for him, and I would definitely agree with that. I think that they're going to bring one of these two guys back between Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams.
Yeah.
But I'll let you talk about that more. I won't steal all your thunder. So, but I mean, he definitely showed that he can play with the big boys. He had started some games in this league. He's also been come in and I mean, we were even watching because the Packers are on prime time a lot, and we're just sitting there in the chat. And I know a couple of our guys have Aaron Jones as a fantasy running back, and they're just like counting the snaps that Jamal Williams is getting. And just like kind of just flipping out in our group chat with Jamal Williams getting all this playing time and Aaron Jones on the sidelines with his helmet off and just so I mean, like, the Packers think that he's a good running back, and he is a good running back, and he could definitely go to any team and kind of help him out as a RB2.
Yeah, Jamal Williams is a guy, if you don't watch him, I don't think you appreciate him. There's a reason he gets that many carries and he's in the backfield that often. He is a very talented pass blocker. He's another one of those guys, similar to what I said with Aaron Jones earlier. He runs hard, and Jamal Williams, I was impressed with him last year because when he touched the ball, he looked really explosive. I mean, you can see those numbers right there. He averaged almost 5 yards a carry. When he touched the ball, he was very effective. So I hope he goes somewhere where he has a good opportunity. That's why I think the Texans would be interesting as well, just as a compliment to David Johnson. But yeah, I mean, I don't really like saying they're going to stay with their current team, but with no Aaron Jones, I think it is a good spot for him. AJ Dillon is going to be an early down back. Jamal Williams, I think, would still have a 40% share there, and I think that's pretty optimistic. And I think that's really his top end point no matter where he goes. So if you complement him with AJ Dillon, I think their skill sets are really perfect to complement one another. So I really see them retaining him, and I think it's the best case scenario for him as well. He's shown that he fits into this offense well. He can protect Aaron Rodgers on passing downs. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. And I can't see him going anywhere unless somebody offers him a ton of money, but I can't see that happening either.
Yeah. No, that's definitely a good one, staying with the Packers. This guy, I don't even want to talk about him. He's burned me in fantasy so many times. But we got James Conner, most likely not going to be back with the Steelers, testing free agency. He's one of the, like, every single play, it's just like, please get up, James Conner. Or when they're on the goal line, they don't even have him in there and stealing touchdowns away. So it's as far as fantasy goes, I'm pretty much done with him. I don't care where he goes.
Wow.
But some good landing spots that you got from the Seahawks, the Bills, and the Dolphins. I mean, I can definitely see any one of those spots going in there to replace Chris Carson, coming in to Buffalo to be to kind of split time with either Singletary or Moss, or going to the Dolphins and potentially splitting time with Myles Gaskin. I mean, he's very talented. I mean, he's really talented, actually. I hate talking about injuries, but he does scare me every time he touches the ball with getting hurt. And I really don't want him on my fantasy team anymore.
Yeah, I'm interested to see where he goes because I think based on his injury history, I don't think he's going to be the guy anywhere. He's probably going to be a part of a committee, which is why I have him going to the Dolphins. And I mean, that's one of the reasons I don't like when people assume Aaron Jones is going to the Dolphins. And I always hear that as his number one landing spot. I mean, Myles Gaskin was really good last year. I don't think Myles Gaskin should just get pushed off to the side. I mean, he wasn't only good. I mean, he looked like a starting running back in the NFL. I mean, he was very impressive. So I think if you bring James Conner in to complement Myles Gaskin, and really it's a 1A, 1B kind of scenario, I think that's ideal for Conner. And I think it's a good chance for Conner to get touches. I mean, when you start really looking at landing spots, how many places are guaranteeing him a ton of touches? Probably teams that aren't very good, like the Jets, maybe the Jets. I mean, that's the number one team that comes to mind for me. I mean, maybe the Seahawks, who I have on this list as well, if they don't retain Chris Carson, I think that would be a really great landing spot for him. I didn't have him going there because I had Aaron Jones going to the Seahawks, and I don't think they're bringing in Aaron Jones and James Conner. So if they weren't to go after Aaron Jones, I do like the Seahawks landing spot. But based on where I have guys going, I had him going to the Dolphins.
And I wouldn't mind that as a Bills fan. Next up, we got ourselves. Oh, there's some highlights. Okay. Next up, we got ourselves Gus Edwards. He is.
I love Gus Edwards.
I do too. I was actually going to say he's a very underrated back. You got the Dolphins, the Bills, and the Seahawks. I think my favorite landing spot, and you might even agree. I don't see you have him on here for Gus, but I think it would be the Jaguars going into Jacksonville and kind of just like, I mean, we saw James Robinson just carry the ball, what was it, 85% of the time, or he had like 85% of the RB touches last year. Gus Edwards is a nice change of pace back. I mean, it might take away some touchdowns from James Robinson, especially because they like to use, or Baltimore at least like to use Gus Edwards towards the goal line. If it wasn't Lamar Jackson keeping it, it was Gus Edwards punching it in. But I think that he'd be an excellent complementary back, kind of like Latavius Murray is to Alvin Kamara, kind of like really what a Zach Moss is to Devin Singletary. Basically, it'd be Gus Edwards and James Robinson. I think that he'd be very fantasy relevant in a deeper flex league. You could play even with James Robinson in there. You could still play a guy like Gus Edwards because he is going to get those touches, and he's going to get those valuable touches at the goal line.
I really hope Gus Edwards goes somewhere where he gets a lot of touches. I mean, I don't think a lot of people realize he has had 3 straight seasons of 700 yards as arguably the second or third running back on his team each one of those seasons. I mean, that's impressive. I mean, he has been good every single year in the NFL. And I've said this in other episodes before. He reminds me of Michael Turner. And people probably don't remember, but Michael Turner used to be behind LaDainian Tomlinson in the early 2000s. And it seemed like he was just hiding behind LT that whole time. And Gus Edwards didn't have an LT necessarily, but Michael Turner obviously signed with the Falcons and exploded. But Gus Edwards, it's always felt like that to me. I mean, he averages 5.2 yards per carry in his career. When he touches the ball, he is effective. So I really hope he goes somewhere where he can touch the ball a lot. Realistically, I think he's going to be more of a power back complement. So I have him going to the Cardinals because if they do lose Kenyan Drake, I like Chase Edmonds. I'm still not 100% confident he's a lead back. I think he's more of a change of pace, Austin Eckler kind of guy. So I think that would be a great. Gus Edwards has had like a 30% share of his team's backfield touches. So if he was able to, and we've seen what he can do with that. So if he goes to the Cardinals, I could see that being almost a 50-50 split. I do think that would be nice for his fantasy value, and I think he'll still be underappreciated and would be a deeper sleeper next year. But I think you pair him up with Gus Edwards or with Chase. He's pairing up with himself now. But I think if you paired him up with Chase Edmonds, I would like that combo. You got the power and speed. I did think about putting Carlos Hyde to the Cardinals as well because I think that's a similar style of back that the Cardinals will be looking for. But I hope Gus Edwards gets an opportunity like this. I really do.
The good old Gus Edwards and Edwards Gus combination.
Yeah. Top 5 in the league.
And he's one of the running backs that played 16 games too. Next up, we got Le'Veon Bell. He's another guy that his days of being the bell cow starting running back is over with. I mean, the Jets kind of ruined him. You got the best landing spots as the Packers, the Bills, and the Dolphins. I personally think, I mean, he's at the point in the career where he's going to basically just go the get me a ring route, go where he's not going to be the lead guy, just come in and kind of like what Shady did the past couple of years. Shady comes in. He went into Kansas City and then went into Tampa, and just like he didn't really have that big of a role, but he got 2 rings out of it. And I think Le'Veon Bell is going to be one of those guys where he's done a lot in his career. He was the bell cow in Pittsburgh and then kind of just fizzled out in New York. And last year he came in and helped out Clyde Edwards-Helaire a little bit and got a few touches back in the backfield there. But I think it's going to be more so he's going to sign on a cheaper deal to a competitive team, and maybe get into the game. Maybe we're going to see more games than that where he is going to be a healthy scratch and just on the sideline. But you got the Packers and the Bills, which are 2 close to championship teams. I think he might even just go back to the Chiefs and just try to win a ring with them there.
Yeah, I definitely think that's realistic to where he'll go somewhere where he will win a championship. If we're thinking about in terms of touches, if he cares about that, I had him going to the Jaguars. Which is obviously a team that doesn't have championship aspirations next season. But yeah, we mentioned James Robinson a few times here, and we mentioned it in the Sell High episode as well. The number of backfield touches James Robinson had last year, I think, is unsustainable. So I expect them to bring somebody in. So Le'Veon Bell could realistically go there and get a 40% share of the Jaguars' backfield. And if he's able to take some of those passing down, some of that passing down work, that could be a nice opportunity for him because the Jaguars' defense is terrible. So there'll be lots of passing down opportunities. So I think the Jags do need to bring someone in. And I think a veteran guy like this who can be a good presence, especially catching the ball out of the backfield, would be a nice spot.
What about, this one just popped in my head, what about a stick it to your former team? And you also have 2 of their guys leaving, going to the Ravens. They're a championship caliber team too.
Yeah, no, I think that would be a good fit.
All right, awesome. Good talk.
Awesome. Good. Let's do it again next time.
The next guy we got here is Rydog's favorite, Leonard Fournette. Helped him win some fantasy games. He was awesome in the playoffs. I personally, this is another guy that I want in Buffalo. I've been saying it in our chat since, I don't even know, probably the beginning of the playoffs. I've been saying it. He's kind of grew on me. I think that not that I think, he definitely got his ring. He started off the season with the team that ended up with the 1st overall pick and ended up being the team with the 32nd overall pick. He's got his ring. He showed in the playoffs that he can run with the best of them, just running through people, running around people, spin moves, jukes. He's still got it. He's still young too. He's not an old fart, but he's definitely a guy that he's more of like a power back that can find the end zone. He only had 6 touchdowns last year, but he was also kind of getting acclimated with the Tampa Bay Bucs offense. They did struggle early in the season, and then finally when Brady started getting everything going, and Evans ended up getting his 1,000 yards. Antonio Brown came in and was pretty decent. Rob Gronkowski came in. They just had too many weapons for Fournette to really get going, and they were still trying to get Ronald Jones involved too. But my favorite spot would be the Bills, and if he were to come to Buffalo, we would be pretty fantasy relevant, I think, as the lead dog here.
Yeah, and I think now that Fournette got his ring, you're going to see him go just somewhere where he can. I think he takes a 1-year deal for a team where he can get a ton of carries, and then he tries to cash in next off season realistically. So I have him going to the Jets, and finally I have the Jets signing somebody. And I think from day one he would have a huge workload with the Jets. They have some young linemen who Max Becton looked really good last year, so their offensive line is improving. But I think from a fantasy perspective, you want Leonard Fournette to get touches, and that's the bottom line. And he would 100% do that with the Jets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, any of these running backs would.
Yeah.
Next guy we got is Mark Ingram. He kind of fizzled out last year. He was a healthy scratch for a few games. I don't even think he suited up in the playoffs at all for him. Mm-hmm. But he's still he's on the wrong side of 30 now. But with a lot of the time off last year that he had and not getting a lot of touches, I think he still has a few more seasons left in him. He's another one of those guys where kind of like we were talking about Todd Gurley and how we were talking about a guy like Gus Edwards going to a team and being more of the complementary back to the star backfield. I think that the best spot for him for me would probably be the Lions. They got DeAndre Swift and Adrian Peterson is probably on his way out. I know he still wants to play, but I don't think he's going back to Detroit. Bringing a guy like Mark Ingram who could kind of help out DeAndre Swift there. Swift is going to get more of the full-time role there, but Mark Ingram could come in, punch it in from the goal line. And he's a good between the tackles runner too. We saw it 2 years ago with Baltimore before they brought in J.K. Dobbins. He had a nice handful of touchdowns, but Ingram, I think he's probably looking at not probably, he's definitely looking at more like the 35 to 40% touch share like a lot of these other guys, and I think that Detroit would be one of the better spots for him.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to start getting into some ring chasers here down on this list. I have Mark Ingram going to my Los Angeles Rams. I think it's a good combination of going to a team that's going to be competitive. I know they have Cam Akers, but Malcolm Brown is a free agent, and he's not on this list, but he actually played quite a bit for the Rams last year. They used him quite a bit in goal line sets. And he was a pretty good pass blocker. So I like Mark Ingram going there, taking over, maybe that 25 to 30% share that Malcolm Brown had, mentoring Cam Akers a little bit, and potentially having a championship run. So I have him going to my LA Rams.
Your LA Rams, huh? You own them, don't you?
I just bought them yesterday.
Just another jersey for you to get. Another jersey on your wall. Next guy we got is Mike Davis, kind of for me at least, he was in the Wayne Gallman category where I really didn't want any part of the backfield behind Christian McCaffrey. Even if Christian McCaffrey went down, I wasn't really rushing to the computer and trying to get Mike Davis and spending all my fab on him, which it might have turned out to be a bad idea because he did have a solid year. He was an RB1 quite a few weeks. But he's back to being a backup most likely wherever he signs. And the three spots that you have listed on the screen here for everybody to see, the Giants, the Texans, and the Jags are definitely the best landing spots. We've already talked about reasons for all three of those teams, and he kind of fits in as the same as those other players that we've talked about already. Your Mark Ingrams and your Gus Edwards, and we keep on saying the same names, but they're all similar kind of backs. And I don't think Mike Davis is going in and signing a deal to be a lead back somewhere. He's just going to be one of those complimentary backs. Now, the way that he played last year, he might get more touches than what he would have if Christian McCaffrey was there the whole year. But I think that he's definitely going to be one of those backs that he's going to get some shares, but he's not going to be the lead guy.
Yeah, and I told you when we were prepping for this episode, it's really funny that there's two top 12 running backs that we're talking about today. One was Aaron Jones, and the other one is Mike Davis, who was RB12 in fantasy last year.
And he's going to pair up with David Mike, huh?
Yeah, I guess. Just kind of bizarre there. But, I think number one for me is the Texans. David Johnson proved that he can handle a solid workload, but he does have injury concerns there. Duke Johnson did get some touches there. So with him departing, it's a good chance for Mike Davis to not – Mike Davis, by the way, wouldn't have gotten any touches really if Christian McCaffrey didn't go down. So if he went over to the Texans, you could see him having a 35% share, we'll say. And if David Johnson went down, he could be similar to what he did last year with the Panthers. So I think a spot like that would be perfect for him. Perfect.
Next up, we got Duke Johnson, who was just released at the time of this episode, just within the past week or so. Good complimentary back to David Johnson last year. Actually, he played quite a bit last year. Definitely not the same kind of year that we've seen him when he was at Cleveland. He's a really good pass catching back out of the backfield. I think that he would be a good replacement for if he were not to resign for Aaron Jones in Green Bay. Obviously Aaron Jones is the better back, but Duke Johnson reminds me a little bit of Aaron Jones, especially just out of the backfield. Not really as a runner, but out of the backfield reminds me of him. We've already mentioned how Jamal Williams is a really good pass blocker and better overall back. And then you got A.J. Dillon, who's got thighs bigger than Saquon Barkley's. He's going to be a big power back. So the only thing that they'd be missing would be another weapon for Aaron Rodgers out of the backfield, and that's Duke Johnson, who can catch the ball in open space and kind of make some people miss. And he could be fantasy relevant in a high-powered offense like the Green Bay Packers.
Yeah, I really like the Patriots landing spot personally. It feels like a Bill Belichick kind of move, first of all. James White is most likely not going to be returning there, which I think could be a pretty big deal. He's been a pretty important part of that offense, and if James White decides to move on, they're going to have to replace him because I don't think Damian Harris or Sony Michel are going to be great options on third down for them. So I think Duke Johnson would be perfect. You bring him in, complement Sony Michel and Damian Harris there. And I think he'd have a pretty sizable role. I could see him catching, 50 or so passes with the Patriots out of the backfield. So from a fantasy perspective, he'd be more relevant than we're used to seeing probably.
All right, we got a few more left here. Next up, we got Carlos Hyde. Again, he's another running back that is going to be more of like a 2 or a 3 somewhere. You got the best landing spots as the Cardinals, Lions, and the Falcons. I haven't really mentioned the Falcons at all. I could see him being with the Falcons, but they'd have to go out and get somebody to be their top dog first. I don't think that Carlos Hyde is going in and being the guy. I don't think that Brian Hill is the guy either. I think that Carlos Hyde could come in and be like an RB2 or an RB3 in that high-powered offense in Atlanta. I mean, he's not really going to carry a lot of relevancy as far as fantasy goes with any team that he goes to, unless it's the Jets.
Right. Yeah. And that feels like the story for a lot of these guys. But I think that Falcons are an interesting one. I think if they bring in Najee Harris, we'll say, via the draft, you could bring in Carlos Hyde to be a really good backup behind him. So I think that would make a lot of sense. I have him going to the Broncos as a good landing spot as well. With Philip Lindsay most likely not returning, they'll need somebody behind Melvin Gordon. So I think you bring him in. And Carlos Hyde he's kind of the perfect backup running back because you can give him a few touches on the goal line to spell a guy throughout the game. But if your starter needs to miss a few games, we've seen Carlos Hyde have huge games. So he has that perfect blend of he's reliable, but he could spot start for you and you're not starting, a scrub in the backfield. So I like him going to the Broncos behind Melvin Gordon.
All right. Next up, we got Tevin Coleman. Not really much to say about him. Hasn't really seen a lot out of him the past year or so. He played 8 games last year. Did not find the end zone. He was in a pretty heavy backfield. And that's probably what we're going to be seeing out of Tevin Coleman again. I don't really see a team going out there and spending RB2 money on him. I think he's going to be. I'd rather sign Carlos Hyde than I would Tevin Coleman, but I think Tevin Coleman, he'd have to go somewhere like the Lions or the Jets to be any kind of relevant. But if you're probably looking at a team that is pretty much established already at running back and just another body to bring in at camp, and maybe he makes the cut, makes the final 53. Then we see him with injuries, but I don't think he's going to be really much of anything. That time has passed. This isn't Atlanta anymore, Dorothy.
So yeah, I realistically think Tevin Coleman hasn't been overly effective. I know a lot of people wanted him to live up to more in San Francisco, going back and pairing up with Kyle Shanahan. But the reality is I think he's just going to be depth for a team at this point. So I had the Rams listed here. I think that'd be an interesting one. I mentioned Malcolm Brown heading into free agency. So you could see him being a part of a potential 3-headed monster there. But I actually at the end had him going to the Bills, providing a little depth behind Zach Moss and Devin Singletary. So, we're getting to the point here. And actually the next guy intrigues me a little bit, but Tevin Coleman still has that upside, still has that potential. It's similar to when they brought in TJ Yeldon. I think Tevin Coleman fills in a role like that.
All right, let's talk about that next guy. Next guy that we got here is going to be James White, and as you already mentioned a couple guys ago, James White has been, I mean, he's been really good. I mean, he's kind of in that Gus Edwards category where he just kind of just flies under the radar, but he still ends up putting together some pretty solid fantasy seasons. He can be used, not really on a weekly basis, but he's a guy that he can be used every once in a while. More often than not, he could be used throughout your fantasy season if you needed a running back and you're kind of in a pinch. A guy that you can trade for really cheap in your fantasy leagues, and a guy that just he's going to perform more often than not. I think he's going to be pretty sought after. He does bring a lot to the table. He could catch out of the backfield. He can run it. They didn't really use him a lot running the ball, but he can run it if he needed to. If we have Leonard Fournette leaving the Tampa Bay Bucks, I could see James White going to reunite with Tom Brady out there and kind of just building the Patriots of the South if they haven't already with Rob Gronkowski and a little bit of Antonio Brown. But I think James White going into Tampa Bay, whether they are sticking with Ronald Jones or they're bringing somebody else in or Keyshawn Vaughn takes the next step, I think James White could be another weapon for Tom Brady to go and try to repeat again next year before he rides off to the sunset.
Yeah, I mean, James White was more relevant than people realize last year, still almost having 50 receptions in 14 games. I have him going back with one of his former coaches to the Giants, pairing up with Joe Judge there. And I mean, Saquon is a great back out of the backfield, but I think we've seen with his injury concerns, you do need another guy to spell him at times. And the other thing that they struggled with, and Wayne Gallman struggled at times, but he did improve. But James White could be a great pass protector next to Daniel Jones, especially with how terrible that offensive line is. So from a fantasy perspective, too, I do think he would get a good amount of work there next to Saquon, because I really think they're going to look to not completely reduce his workload, but, maybe instead of being in that 75% range, we bring him down to 65% or so, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it would still be a top 10 in the league.
All right. And then these last two guys, we could have easily knocked this list down to 15, but I think you have to add these last two guys, so we made it 20. Frank Gore is the first one. He's just, I don't know if he's ever going to retire. I think he wants to play until his son's in the league.
Yeah.
And then play on the same team as him. But Frank Gore, he's been around the league just as much as Ryan Fitzpatrick. And just for shits and giggles, I'm just going to say he's going to go to the Patriots just to complete the gauntlet there too. Ryan Fitzpatrick went through the NFC or the AFC East. I think that Frank Gore could go through the AFC East too. So just go sign in New England.
Going to the good old Patriots. Well, I think that Frank Gore hates winning, so he's going to replace another old guy and go to the Lions. So Adrian Peterson and Frank Gore are just going to swap places. Well, not completely swap, because I don't have AP going to the Jets. I like him more than that. But yeah, I mean, I think he'd be a great mentor to DeAndre Swift. It is a different coaching staff, so it's not necessarily true that they would give Frank Gore a decent workload, but I mean, I think Kyrion's kind of irrelevant at this point, so Frank Gore could be the number 2 guy behind DeAndre Swift and get some goal line touches. So it's a win-win for the Lions, and Frank Gore gets to keep on chugging.
Keep on trucking. And then our final guy we got here is Adrian Peterson. You got the best landing spots as the Jets, the Bears, and the Panthers. He's a little bit younger than Frank Gore, but it seems like he's been around for forever too. He says he wants to play into his 40s, I think it was, or at least another 5 years. So whatever age that will put him at. But his days of being the bell cow, the Adrian Peterson that we saw back in Minnesota are over with. I mean, in order for him to continue to play and keep on playing, he's going to have to go to a team where they're pretty solid at running back, and he could just come in and kind of just spell the running back. But his best chance to play, obviously, would be the Jets. I think that, I mean, if I were him, if I were the Jets, I'd try to go get him too. That would get some jersey sales to get that number 28 jersey out in New York. But I think that it would just be like come full circle, just go back to Minnesota and kind of back up Dalvin Cook there. They still got Madison, and I know that you think Madison is is one of the better backup running backs. And I'll agree with you. I'm not saying that I don't, but just have Adrian Peterson go back to Minnesota and just go in there when Dalvin Cook needs a break and just recycle those number 28 jerseys in purple and gold.
Oh, I think I just shed a tear for that moment. But I think that he should go ring chasing, baby. Go to the Buccaneers, replace Leonard Fournette there. And I do think he could play there. I mean, we just saw Leonard Fournette get a decent amount of touches. I don't know if they're ready to – obviously, they're not fully ready to just hand over the keys to Ronald Jones. Otherwise, they rode him harder in the playoffs. So, I mean, you could see him go there and be the number 2 back. I don't know what their future holds for Keyshawn Vaughn there. That's a name a lot of people forgot about, but I think he could end up taking a lot of that third down work that a lot of people expected him to take last year before Fournette came. But AP could realistically be the number 2 back in Tampa Bay and have a chance to win. So it's kind of a win-win for him.
Number 1 in New York and number 2 in Tampa.
Yep.
All right. I mean, we went through a lot, and there's probably a couple more that had a handful of touches last year. But anybody that just at the top of your head that you could think of, or do you think we covered all the main ones?
I mean, the only one, and it's only because I'm a Rams fan, would be Malcolm Brown, but that's not really relevant.
Yeah.
He'll sign somewhere. He'll be a third running back on someone's depth chart.
It's tough. I mean, it should be getting easier. Like you would think that it would be getting easier because more teams are going to using 2 running backs and even some are using 3 running backs. So you're at least like, aside from like your Christian McCaffrey and your Barkley when he's fully healthy and even Dalvin Cook, but like you're probably looking at closer to 64 relevant running backs as opposed to the 32 because of the way that the league is turning. But it's hard, like just even predicting these guys where they're going. And like if last year's NFL draft taught us anything, it's that we're going to be surprised by 90% of these picks, 90% of these signings. But yeah, it's definitely going to be a fun off season. Quarterbacks came out, so make sure you go listen to that one. Obviously, we got the running backs today, and then next week we'll do the wide receivers and tight ends, and then by then free agency will officially be open. We'll be talking about where these players actually land, get into the off season stuff about what other needs that these teams have, the cuts, because there's going to be a lot of cuts this year, especially with the cap going down. And then before you know it, it's going to be draft time. Not only NFL draft, but it's going to be fantasy draft time. And we're going to be here for all your needs. So make sure you check us out at the Fantasy Mafia on Facebook, the Fantasy Hotspot on Facebook, youtube.com/the Fantasy Mafia, thefantasymafia.com. And I think I got them all. You want to throw your Twitter out there?
Now, you are an absolute pro. Dr. Fantasy Sports. Check it out. But like Jerry said, lots of stuff coming out. So we appreciate you guys listening. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube. You'll get a notification anytime we're live or we post new content. So hit that subscribe button.